Cassidy Ann. That she had my feet. She had her second toe was longer than her first toe. And I was like disappointed in that, I guess, because I didn't want her to have what I've always considered ugly toes.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. Welcome to Still a Part of Us. We are very excited to talk to Lori here. We have a little bit of a unique situation where we have somebody that has had a loss that's been a little bit longer than just a year or a couple of years or a few years. You've got a number of years since your loss, Lori. So thank you so much for reaching out to us and for being willing to share Cassidy's story with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about who you are, just so that we can kind of know who you are. And then can you give us a little bit of an idea of how long ago Cassidy was born?
Sure. So she was born in 1997. So she would be, forgive my math here. What is that? She would be 27 this year, right?
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah, 27. That's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Our family was living in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the time. And my husband worked for a big supermarket chain. If anybody's in Michigan, they will know which one I mean.
Okay.
It's like the biggest one.
Okay.
And he was working in their audiovisual department. And our oldest son was actually turning 9. He and Cassi share a birthday. And so that was another dynamic to our situation.
Yeah.
Our second son was 7, and then our daughter was almost 4. So we had the 3 of them, and then Cassi was our 4th. And, my situation was a little bit different, I think, than a lot of people, because she wasn't planned and she was very unexpected.
Yeah.
And I was very sad to be pregnant. That's a very real feeling, and it almost makes, I just feel horrible when I think back to that time and how I was feeling about it, because she was our 4th child. And for whatever reason, I just had this terrible thought that people were going to look at us and say, oh, don't you know what causes that? You got 4 kids, and, don't you know how to stop that, kind of thing. And it was really silly, and I shouldn't have been worried about that. But after I had Abby, who was our 3rd child, my health really took a nosedive. My thyroid stopped working. I had a lot of depression that set in. It wasn't really postpartum depression, but I guess it was, because it was after she was born. But it started about when she was about 4 months old.
Okay.
And so I fought with that for a long time. And I remember, trying to handle her as a newborn, and my 2 little boys, who would have been, 4 and 2, 5 and 3, something like that.
Right.
They would walk down the sidewalk to the neighbor's house. And I didn't think anything of it. Now, granted, this was in 1997. Things were a little bit different because we lived in a real tiny neighborhood, really tiny town. But people, the neighbors would come back and say, oh, the boys were walking down the street again. And I just felt like a total failure, because I couldn't do my job as a mom, and Abby's birth was like something totally different. Like, I wanted to breastfeed really badly, and I hadn't been able to breastfeed our second son, and breastfeeding all around was just a horrendous thing for me.
It was hard. Yeah.
And then when I had Abby, then I took steps to make it better, and I was able to successfully nurse her without problems until she was about 6 months old.
Okay, great.
So, but anyway, having said all that, after she was born, and my health went downhill, and then I got pregnant again, and we weren't expecting it. And I had always said I wanted 4 children, but at that point I was like, I'm not really sure I'm ready for a fourth one,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, postpartum does kind of do a number on you. It really makes you stop and think can I do it again? That was so hard or
Yeah.
and I'm assuming back in, that would have been what, 94, 95
4.
when you had Abby,
Mhm.
and there was not tons of talk about postpartum depression.
No,
And
no, there wasn't a lot of help for anything really. I mean,
yeah.
we didn't have regular ultrasounds. I
Mhm.
didn't even know I didn't know she was a girl until I was 39 weeks pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's because the doctor, well, we moved from Niles, Michigan to Grand Rapids when I was 8 months pregnant with
Oh,
Abby.
whoa.
And yeah, had 3 weeks, mind you, to pack up our entire house and move to Grand Rapids. Yeah.
Whoa.
So that, yeah, because my husband had gotten the new job, and that's
Right.
why we moved up there. So the doctor that we went to in Michigan didn't do routine
Mm.
ultrasounds at any point. A lot of places didn't. And so when we moved to Grand Rapids, my boys had hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Oh,
And I was just kind of concerned, because here I am pregnant, and could I get that and whatever.
would
And
that affect the
I was,
baby? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I was just really very concerned about that. And my new doctor, what a precious man he was. And he said, if it will calm your nerves, let's go ahead and do an ultrasound just to make sure she's okay. So I was 39 weeks and like 4 days or something. And that
That's
was when we found out she was a girl.
that
So
is great.
yeah, so I know it's hard to look back. Like when I watched the other girls' stories on here and listened to them talk, I'm like, oh, I wish I'd had that back then. Like the cuddle cot, there
Yes.
was no such thing as that back
Yeah.
then.
Just a different time, and the
It was.
technology and the access to care is different. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
different.
very much. People have come a long way, I think, in the whole infant loss
Yes.
community. So.
So Cassie was definitely not planned.
Right.
And when you found out, how did you find out? Was it just like missed period, that type of thing, not feeling great?
Yeah, I think so. It must have been that I missed a period probably because I
Hmm.
was always really regular.
Yeah.
I could always knew when I ovulated and that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to think back, and I think that's what it was. And then I probably took a test. But my other pregnancies, I had a miscarriage between my boys. So between my oldest and second boy, then we had a miscarriage then too. So throughout those pregnancies, all of them, I got sick like in the first trimester, like most people do.
Yeah.
But with Cassidy, the sickness just continued. It just like I was nauseous most days and trying to care for 3 kids. And, I just didn't feel
Hmm.
good.
Yeah. Very hard. Yeah, very hard. And what did your husband say when you guys found out that you were pregnant a fourth time?
Oh, he was very happy.
Was he?
he was very excited. Yeah. And he tried, he really my husband is such a blessing to me. We've been married, it'll be 37 years this year.
Wonderful.
So
Congratulations. That's amazing. Yeah, that is
yeah.
amazing.
So he is my rock. And so he tried really hard then to just tell me, it's going to be okay. I know that you are, sad about this, but it's all going to work out. And so he was very encouraging, but he was really happy that we were going to have one more because we'd always talked about having four.
4. Yeah, and so
So
you're like, it was kind of part of the plan, but also it's hard when you've have some rough patches with postpartum,
right,
so
yeah, definitely.
okay. And then what was the care like when you got pregnant? So did you go in for kind of checkups on a regular basis? Obviously no ultrasounds, no extra checks or anything like that. So how did that look in those first trimester, second trimester?
Right. I did go in for probably, I think probably when I was like 12 weeks, I think.
Mhm.
I went in and, scheduled the appointment in it. And thankfully it was with the same doctor that I had with Abby. And
Oh,
like I
good.
said, he was a precious man. He had 6 children of his own, and he wore a little bow tie every time, in the
Yeah.
office. He was just cute as can be, just so sweet. So I was very happy to be in that office, and they were always kind and everything. But pretty much everything went the same. By that point in time, at least at their office, they were actually doing a 20-week scan, which
Oh,
I'd never had that before either. So
really?
um,
Okay. That is
yeah,
a
so
big deal.
yeah, I mean, we like I said, we didn't know that what any of the sexes of our children were, except
Mhm.
Abby at the last minute. And so I was really excited to be like, oh my goodness, I get to find out the sex ahead of time.
Yeah. But they didn't have any worries or anything. Everything looked good, um,
Yep.
throughout the first couple trimesters there.
Yeah. Yep.
And then
Everything
for
was
the
fine.
ultrasound, that 20-week scan, was your husband there? I mean, was it just you, or how did that look for you?
Yeah, he went with me that day, and so we both got to see her, and of course we were both, tears pouring down our face. My
Oh.
husband is a very, very sensitive guy, and he cries. In our family, we joke that Dad's having a moment. That's what we say. But and interestingly enough, my sons are both like that. They're just very tender-hearted
Oh.
and
Mhm.
compassionate. So yeah, we were thrilled. And then when they said it was another girl, oh man, and at that point I was just like, oh, okay, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Abby will have a sister to play with. We'll have 2 boys and 2 girls, and our family will be complete. And then, at that point, then I just became thrilled.
Yeah.
It's like all the depression, I don't know for what reason, but I guess when I realized that she would be another girl, and I was so thankful to have a girl and one girl.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know, I guess maybe that just kind of helped me feel better about it or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But that I mean, it switched for you, so that's always good just to kinda like, "Oh, there's our family. That's the way our family's gonna look," and I think that's
Yes,
cool.
exactly. Because I knew I wasn't having any more after that. I was like, no way.
We're
We're done
we're
now.
good, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so then once you found out that it was gonna be a girl, did you guys have names chosen now? Were you, like, planning that kinda thing? I always like to ask because it's fun to see where people come up
Oh,
with their
oh,
names.
absolutely. Well, when I was 14 years old, I had a list of girls'
Oh, yeah.
names,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
running. I mean, I have been a motherly person, I guess, since I
mhm.
was tiny. My mom said that when I was 2 years old, I already had 20 baby dolls. So, and she'd get me one all the time.
Yeah.
But I, started babysitting when I was 9 years old
Yeah.
for, the neighbor. And I always, it's a point of pride. No, not really, but people loved when I babysat because I didn't just babysit, but I like cleaned things up. I cleaned up the kitchen. I, picked up the toys. And
Yeah.
I'm like, then when I became a mom, I'm like, oh, that's the kind of babysitter everybody wants,
And it's totally true. I
Yeah.
was like,
And
I yeah.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
got one of those too as
Oh,
a
good.
mom. Thankfully, bless her heart, she's just precious. But anyway, so yeah, so I babysat, and my college education, my major in college was childhood education,
Oh, uh-huh.
early childhood education, actually, like preschool and stuff. So yeah, I just and what did you just ask me?
Oh, I was just asking, what kinda name that you guys decided
Oh, right, right,
on
right. So
because you had a
I
running list of names, which is awesome.
Yes, I did. And the boy names were a little bit harder,
Oh,
but
yes. Yeah.
we did after since we'd had 2 boys, if she was a boy, we had the name going to be Benjamin Joseph, and for whatever reason. And then but for Cassie, I wanted to have Abby and Annie. And those
Okay.
were the 2 names that I just loved Annie. She was going to be Annie Grace. And, well, then my husband decided, you named the first girl. Maybe could I name this one? He like literally asked me that. So I'm like,
Okay.
yes, you can name her, not having any idea what he was going to choose. And he said, well, I've got this name. I really like it, but you probably won't like it and you won't like where I got it. And I'm like, okay, tell me. And he's like, well, it's a character on Star Trek. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I was like, oh, and he's like, her name is Cassidy. And I was just like, huh, well, that's a nice name.
It is
you
a nice
know?
name. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, we knew her middle name. Well, at that point, if she was Annie, she wouldn't have been Annie Ann because Ann is my middle name.
Oh, yes.
So, right. So she would, but Cassidy, we thought Cassidy Ann went together well. So,
Yes, it does. It's got good rhythm. I like it a lot.
yeah, yeah. So, but, of course, Abby's name is Abigail. And so she couldn't
Oh,
just be Cassidy. She had to be Cassie, like Abby.
yes, yes.
So,
Both so cute. So cute.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's fun to like have that. And then your due date, you said that one of your sons shares Cassie's birthday. What
Yeah.
was your due date kind of around that time?
It was my due date, I believe, was October 3rd or October 4th, something like that. But yes, something that I never realized before, but with a lot of women, our ovulation must go back to the same area in time because a lot of people I know have two babies born at the same time of
Yes.
year.
I think so. I think that's correct because that happens in our family. Like in our family
Yeah.
too. It's like, huh, interesting.
Yeah. So I never realized that before, but yeah, she was due around the same time our oldest son was born. He was born on September 23rd. So that we had planned his birthday party for the
Hmm.
night that I delivered Cassie. So after we found out that she had died, bless his heart, he called his little friends on the phone and told them that we had to postpone his birthday party because his baby sister had died. And he's such a compassionate person, even today. And it just breaks my heart when I think about him doing that as a little guy. He
Yeah.
just took charge and made those phone calls because he knew that mama couldn't do it,
Yeah.
So,
Oh man.
so and I didn't think I would cry this in this whole thing, but
Never say never in this
I
when
know.
you're talking about your kids.
Yeah, when we talk about our kids, we when Ezra is my oldest son's name, when he was, gosh, I don't know how old he was because Abby was 5, so this would have been after Cassie. But we lived on kind of the corner of kind of a busy street. We
Hmm.
lived right next to a fire department, and then there was a stoplight there. And an accident had happened one day out there, and it wasn't a horrible death. It wasn't a fatal accident or
Uh-huh.
anything, but
Yeah.
I was up in their bedroom looking out towards the street when I heard this big crash.
Yeah.
So the next thing I see is Ezra and Evan, who is 2.5 years younger, and they were walking out to the car that had a little girl inside of it. And she was standing outside the car, and they were taking their stuffed animals to her.
Oh.
And they had chosen their favorites. And he had a Pikachu that was his favorite. And then Evan, my second son is just a sports boy all around, loves sports. And he had this little Charlotte Hornets mascot,
Oh.
okay, and a
Yeah.
stuffy.
Yeah.
And it was his favorite thing.
Yeah.
And he took that out to that little girl and they gave those to her. And I'm telling you, my kids just surprised me all the time
I
with
know that
their kind spirits.
they sound so sweet and so
Yeah,
caring.
they
That's
were. Yeah, they really were. And they still are. But
yeah.
some of the things they did as children just blew me away.
Yeah.
So,
Kids have that capacity to, yeah, see a need and
yes.
try and
Yeah,
reach out and take care.
exactly.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
So, you guys are planning and everything is going well. You're feeling a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, I was feeling better. Abby's birthday was like the 5th of August, and we had a little birthday party for her. Oh yeah, I guess so she was 4 already. Anyway, that was it was the only picture of me pregnant that we have,
Oh,
if you
from
can
that birthday
believe that.
party. Huh.
Yeah, at that birthday party. And I'm holding her and I can see my belly. And with every other pregnancy, I took maternity, not like formal maternity pictures,
No,
but I
but you
took
took like
ones of,
bump pictures, right?
yeah, yeah. And except with Cassie, that's the only one that I have. And so, yeah, but yeah, things were going well. By that point, I felt good, and I only gained about 12 pounds with her,
Mm.
which was another thing I was so worried about, the whole vanity of, oh, how much weight am I going to gain,
Yeah.
but I had never taken it all off from my first
Oh,
pregnancy.
yeah.
So, it
It's a
just kept
struggle.
packing on pounds. So, yeah, so I gained only 12 pounds, but they didn't seem to have a problem with that. They said, if things were going fine. And then I went in for, so by, what is it, like 36 or 37 weeks, I guess you go in like weekly,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I went in, my appointments were on Monday mornings, and I always took Abby with me, and Matt was at work, boys were in school. And so we went, and it was 37 weeks. And so they're, got me on the table, and they're looking for her heartbeat. And so, they didn't find it right away, and they're like, oh, she's probably sleeping in there. Let's see if we can wake her up, and they kind of jostled my stomach. And then they got her heart rate, and I think it was like in the 140s. So they, everything was okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we went home, and the week progressed as it was going to. And like I said, we were looking towards having Ezra's birthday party. So on Sunday would have been the 22nd, 21st, Sunday, September 21st. We came home from church, and I was making lunch in the kitchen, and I was standing by, I will never forget this as long as I live, standing by the counter, looking out this little window. And Cassie kicked me harder than anything I've ever felt in my life. Like, she had never done that before. Evan did it, our second born. He used to kick and roll. And I mean,
Yeah.
he
Okay.
was
He was
crazy.
all over. Okay.
Yeah. But she had never done that before. She was a pretty quiet baby anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All my kids laid side to side. So I
Mm.
was always like wide, and, so, I knew right where her feet were, and she kicked so hard that she kicked against the counter, and I actually just doubled over in pain.
Whoa.
I just was like, what in the world, and then I stood up, and everything seemed okay. I didn't have any bleeding. My water never broke with any of my children. So that didn't happen, and then she was okay. And so I'm like, well, that is very strange. But I thought,
Yeah.
well, we are getting closer to delivery, so like they always tell you, they don't have much room in there,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so that was on Sunday. And so I went to bed that night, got up the next morning, and Abby and I went to the doctor's appointment for the 38th week, and went in and did all the normal stuff we do, weigh you, check your blood pressure, all
Mm-hmm.
the stuff. And so they're getting ready to listen to the heartbeat, and she could only find mine. And, of course, like every other mom I've listened to, they start like moving or the Doppler around, looking and listening. And then I'll be right back. I'm just going to have somebody else come in and see if they can find it, because they're trying to not, be dramatic or whatever. I'm sure that they
Right.
must know at that point that
Yeah.
their child is no longer alive. And so another nurse came in, and she tried, and my doctor wasn't there, that he was actually in deliveries that day. And so one of the other doctors from the practice came in and checked it, and he said, I don't know what to say. He said, she's just not alive anymore, or what, I don't even know how he said it. And I just sat there shocked. There's no words. And, Abby's in the room with me, and I'm all by myself. My husband, literally, he wasn't even at work. He was in Florida for work. So here I am in Grand Rapids. We have no family anywhere
Right.
near us. Closest family was about 4 hours away. And but my dear friend Rachel, she and I had just been friends, and so I'm like, well, I guess I got to call her because somebody's got to watch Abby. I don't know what I'm doing. I just didn't even know what I was doing. So they said, let's send you over to the hospital because they didn't tell me that she had died. I think they just said we're having a hard time finding the heartbeat or something to that effect.
Okay.
But it was very clear to me that she was already gone,
Yeah.
you know.
And it really
So
hadn't did that hit you? Like, did you fully understand what they were saying?
um I think I did, mind you, for me, it's been 20, almost 27 years.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes.
people are probably like, oh, she's not even emotional about this. But
No, but
trying to just, like relive it. There are parts I remember well, and then parts I don't. So I don't remember a whole lot except pretty much knowing that she surely must not be alive. Because if they can't find her heartbeat,
right,
what is going to the hospital going to help me with?
right.
Like they're going to send me to the hospital to have, what did they say? A more advanced ultrasound is what
Gotcha.
they said.
Okay.
And so I had to drive, by myself. I took Abby to my friend Rachel's house. I mean, somebody, one of the your episodes I listened to yesterday, and I don't remember who it was. I think it might have been Ivy's mom. I can't
Mhm.
remember. Anyway, they
Mhm.
said, I was driving. I don't even know how fast I was driving. I was just driving to get there.
Yep.
And that was me. I was taking, I had to take like a little highway, like Rachel's house was probably 25 minutes,
Oh,
20, 25 minutes away. So I had to take Abby to Rachel's house, and I had to make sure that Rachel could pick my boys up from school because I didn't know what was going to happen now. And so anyway, so I dropped Abby off. The whole time I'm speeding down the road, driving back, and I'm just saying, Lord, please don't let this be real. Please, if there's anything you can do, please save my baby, like, what can we do here? And, I just kept, just calling out, Jesus, please don't take her. And of course, then feeling so much incredible guilt that I hadn't wanted her in the beginning. That just killed me because I felt like I was being punished. Like this was your punishment because you didn't want this baby in the beginning. And, you know, I blessed you with this baby, and I know God doesn't punish us like that. I know that's not true. But, in that moment, you
yeah.
feel things that you never think you would feel,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I was so sad and I was so angry, that this was happening. And so I got to the hospital, and they took me up to the labor and delivery floor, and put me in a room with a little symbol on the door, like, most of, the other women have talked about.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was like a rose of some sort. And I went in that room. And so they already were prepared for the fact that she wasn't alive. And so I, laid down on the table, and they hooked me up to this more advanced ultrasound. I don't know if there is such a thing anymore, but back then there was. And, I could see her, that she wasn't moving, and there was no heart, there's no little pulsing of that heart,
Yeah.
and so I really don't even remember what I did at that point. I'm sure that I must have just been, crying, moaning,
Yeah.
and I think maybe I might have been a little bit concerned with not hurting someone else's feelings that were in the room or something. Like, I don't want them to see me, fall to pieces here or
Yeah.
something. And but I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I never even thought that at all. But maybe I think later on in life, I may have just thought that that's what happened. I don't even remember. So many things are so
Yeah.
foggy.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, they said, well, who can we call for you? And I'm like, oh, great. Who can you call? Well, my husband's in Florida,
Yeah.
and my husband works, if I'm allowed to say where he works, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he works for ESPN now. So
Mhm.
his career has always been in video. And then once, when we were in Grand Rapids, we eventually ended up moving from Grand Rapids a few years later because he started to become a freelance
Oh.
operator
Mhm.
where he was his own employer,
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
And he had started doing some of that on the side while he was working for Meyer, which is the big grocery store
Mhm.
chain.
Mhm.
And so this particular event that he was at was his very first going out on his own thing.
Right. And so it was kind of a big deal that he needed to be there.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So, back then, anybody who listens will probably be like, oh my gosh. But back then, all we had was pagers. We
Yeah.
didn't
Oh.
have a cell phone. I
Mhm.
didn't get my first cell phone until 1998, maybe.
Yeah. Mhm.
But,
Yep. That's about
um,
right.
yeah, so he had a pager well, wait a minute. Is that right? You know what? Now that I'm saying that, I'm like, that's not right because that was when Abby was born that he had the pager, but I still don't know if I had a cell phone because they called from a landline. That's why I'm trying to remember. Did I have a
Yeah.
cell phone then? I'm not sure that I did, but they did call from the hospital room, like
Right.
from the landline
Yeah.
to get in
Yeah.
touch with them.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a little confusing, but so I had the number for Matt, but I don't know. I don't think it was a cell phone either because they had to go and look for him. Like I
Oh,
had a number that was,
maybe like a landline there so that
yeah,
they could
like,
actually they would have to go find him. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense
right.
actually.
Yeah. And so they got in touch with them. And I guess that, whoever answered the phone on that end in Florida then went to look for him. And mind you, he was brand new. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a wonder they even knew who he was
Yeah.
because, he'd not worked with this crew before and they didn't know him. He didn't know them. And so they just went and got him and told him he had an emergency phone call. And the nurse was the one who did all of that for me. She actually got him on the phone. And she said, this is nurse so and so from, St. Mary's Hospital. And I have your wife is here with us and
Mhm.
she needs to speak with you. And I can't imagine what was going through his mind because it
Oh,
could have
yeah.
been so many different things. So he got on the phone and I just, I wish I could remember exactly what wording I used to
Mhm.
tell him, but I think I probably said the baby died. I don't think I used her name. I think I just said, just the baby died. And of course, like everyone else's husband, I'm sure he said, what?
Yeah. Yep.
What do you mean? What happened? What are you talking about? And I just said, they, don't know what happened. I went to the appointment this morning and there was no heartbeat. And of course, I think he was in shock too, because he didn't like break down weeping on the phone, like
Yeah.
it wasn't, broke down and was a weeping, blubbering mess at that
Yeah.
point in time. So he said, oh, well, I got to get home. What am I going to do? I've got to get home. And I said, well, I mean, you can do what you can to get here. I mean,
Right.
because we didn't know what was going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
would they let him leave? I mean, his position was core to this event that he was
He
at.
was in yeah.
And so they got him an emergency flight home. And another part of this too, Winter, is that we were very poor. We were a young
Young
family
family,
and
exactly.
yeah, we were young and we didn't have extra money for an emergency flight home, but I
Right.
believe that they paid for it.
Oh,
Somebody paid for his flight to get him out. I don't know if it was the airline. I don't know who did that. But anyway, he ended up getting home about midnight.
Oh, that
So
day. Okay.
yeah, so there are all those hours that I had to spend, waiting for him. And I just, I was just in shock. I mean, I
Yeah.
honestly really don't remember much of anything that happened
Mhm.
during those hours until he came home.
And were you at the hospital still, or did they end up sending you home?
They did send me home. They ended up. I was there for probably, well, not for very long,
Yeah.
because there was nothing they could do. So yeah, so they sent me home, and I remember, I think, going to Rachel's house because
Mhm.
it was my appointment would have been at like 10ish in the morning. So I don't
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
know, but it seems like my kids were already out of school. So it may have been around 3:30 or 4. That's what seems right to me, that I ended up getting, to her house because um, while I was at the hospital, we talked about what are we going to do,
Yeah.
you know, and they were like, well, you can keep her in. You can, until your body spontaneously goes into labor, which I don't, I mean, I don't know how you do that if your baby's already died. Like, does your body just automatically know to expel it? I don't know.
Yeah. Mhm.
And but that was an option, and I was like, oh my goodness, no, I can't just keep her in there knowing that she's not alive. And at this point they had no idea why.
Right.
They didn't know if there were birth defects, even though they had never seen anything on the
Yeah.
scan. But after that 5-week scan, I hadn't had any other ultrasounds,
Mhm. Mhm.
because still that was not a regular thing. Even in that last month, they didn't do regular ultrasounds.
Yeah.
So I just remember he's like, well, you can stay here and deliver, or you can go home and choose another day to deliver, and I knew I didn't want to deliver then because Matt wasn't there.
Yeah.
I needed him to be there with me. And I asked if I could just have a C-section. Can you just put me out and take out the baby? And
Yep.
and they were like, unfortunately, we can't do it that way. There's too much risk to you,
Yeah.
and a major surgery like that. And I just, oh my goodness, just the horror to me of knowing I was going to have to deliver her. That, oh my goodness, that was just that I just hated that thought.
Yeah.
How in the world am I
Yeah.
going to do this?
Yeah.
And I had had all three of my babies naturally. I had never had like an
Oh.
epidural, even. Although, boy, do I wish I would have said yes to, earlier. But I had been induced with Evan, so I knew what an induction was, what an induction would be like.
Mhm.
Um, and all of my babies came within 12 hours from start to finish of
Oh,
labor.
wow. Okay.
So
So
yeah, so
quick.
I
That's
I had
quick.
them. Yeah, I had them really, pretty fast. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
most of the time, I think 5 pushes with my first baby was all it took for him to
Whoa.
come out. So things just kind of went boom, boom, boom for me typically. So I
Yeah.
knew that being induced, it wasn't going to take long once we got moving along and stuff. So I said, I'm going to go home and I'll talk to Matt, I believe is what I said. And the doctor gave me his personal phone number and said, here's my number. You call me when you have decided what you want to do. He's like, you just go home, you talk to him about it. Well, I'm sure he wasn't thinking that my husband wasn't going to get home till midnight,
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
But he had said, you call me whenever. I don't care what time it is. You call and let me know what you want to do. So we went home, and I remember picking up the kids from Rachel's, and I believe I must have called a friend from church because we did,
Mhm.
like I said, we didn't have any family there.
Yeah.
We just had our church family and then Rachel.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
were, our
Those were
neighbors,
your
but we didn't
yeah.
really know them,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I called my friend and asked her if she would come over and sit with me. And I explained what had happened. And I said, I've got, the kids are all 3 kids are here. I need to feed them. I need to bathe them. I need to get them, ready for whatever's going to happen next. And, I just like, I didn't really know what I was even saying, I just like,
Yeah.
can you just come over, please, and she did. And she made them dinner. I remember her doing some laundry. I remember sitting on the couch and folding some laundry, which, I think the reason why we women do laundry is because it's like mindless work.
Yes.
Like when you're folding laundry, you don't have to think about anything. You just like
Yes.
fold, like you just know what you're doing. You fold your towels a certain way,
Yep.
you fold your shirts, and you're just doing it. And I remember doing that. And then after that, I don't remember anything. Like I don't remember anything from the time my friend was there. She must have probably put the kids to bed and then gone back home to her family, I would
Yeah.
assume. She lived about 30 minutes from us. And I don't remember if we talked about maybe she would keep my boy, I think because what I had decided was that I couldn't have my children there with me.
Okay.
For whatever reason, and maybe I know that probably seems odd to some people.
No, I don't. Nope. No, I don't think that is a hard decision to make and introduce. I mean, yeah, like there's so many possibilities that it could cause trauma, but it also could,
Right.
yeah. So I there's no judgment there because I think everybody goes through that actually
Right.
with other
And
kids.
of course, the next day, the 23rd, was Ezra's ninth birthday.
Yeah.
And how I didn't know how he would handle it being his birthday. And I just didn't know what the right thing to do was. So what we decided then when Matt got home that night and we talked about it, and of course, I think he probably had to take a cab home or somebody picked him up. I think one of our church friends picked him up and brought him home. But I think what he was devastated, obviously,
Yeah.
and he came in and dropped his bags and just ran over, and we just hugged and just wept, for I don't know how long. I remember not going to bed until about 2 o'clock, so I'm sure we must have just held each other for a couple hours and just wept and talked about what we were going to do, what are our next steps going to be,
Yeah.
where's she going to be buried, are we going to have a funeral? I mean, all those things bombard you at one time and you just don't know what to do. So once we just talked through it, we decided that we were going to go in and be induced in the next morning, that we would send our boys to school, and that Rachel would keep Abby. And we basically, I'm sure we must have told them Cassie died, or she's not going to be able to come home with us, or something.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to worry. Like I didn't want them to be at school all day thinking, oh, my baby sister died and she's coming out now. And, I just
Yeah.
didn't know how much they could understand and handle. And,
Yeah.
even though I knew my boys were very sensitive and very compassionate, but so we just sent them to school. Matt and I dropped them off just like it was any other day, and
Yeah.
said goodbye. Okay, now Rachel's going to be here to pick you up, and we just tried to be as normal as we could for them. And so then we took Abby to Rachel's, and then we went to the hospital and got there, and they started the Pitocin,
Mhm.
and I believe that we started that about, well, it would have been about 9 or
Yeah.
9:30, because the kids we didn't need to get them to school until like 8:30, I
Yeah.
guess. So
Yeah.
it was probably about 9:30ish, 10 o'clock or something, maybe, when they started it, the drip. And I don't remember. I heard one of the moms say the other day that they didn't hook up the fetal monitor, because there was no heartbeat. So why
Yeah.
would you need a heartbeat monitor,
Yeah.
And that, kind of like made me think, did we do that? And I don't know. They may have done that for me, but I honestly don't remember. I just
Mhm.
remember getting hooked up to machines. And I remember they said, do you want an epidural, or what kind of pain management do
Oh,
you
okay.
want,
Yeah.
is how they said it. And because I'm sure I had told them that I had not had drugs before
Right.
for my pregnant, for my deliveries. Not always by choice. One time I wanted them and it was too late. Or
Yes.
that's what they told me.
That happens.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, you're too far gone now.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but I said I would like an epidural, and they're like, no problem. Well, we're going to get that set up for you. We call the anesthesiologist, or whatever they have to do. They were so lovely to me. They were
Oh, good.
so kind, and like I said, at this point, no one knew why she died. She just was gone, and they were just so awesome. Anyway, and they gave me anything I wanted, so when I said I would like an epidural, well, that's what we did. Well, believe it or not, the epidural only took on one side of my body. So I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it
But
is.
yeah, so I didn't know, because I'd never had one before, but I didn't know that was a thing, and it ended up that only one side of my lower half was numb. And again, I just thought, that was, like I said before, I don't believe God punishes us for things, and I don't believe that He's this man in the sky who sits up there and looks down on us and throws trials and tribulations our way.
Yeah.
Just for spite.
Yeah.
I do not believe that at all. But that's how it felt in that day, at that time. It felt like, oh, great. Well, here we are, Lord. I wanted
Here's
an
another
epidural,
thing. Yeah.
and you gave me half of one. Well, that's just great. Thanks a lot. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate that I ever even thought that, but what I do know is God's grace is there for us, and it was there for me. And I know that God is a loving God, and He took care of us unbelievably. Like, I never thought I could ever go through something like this. I mean, you hear about other people, it happening to them, and you're like, oh my goodness, I could never go through that. Or losing someone's family in a car accident, or your house burning down, or oh, I could never go through that. But you could, and God gives you the grace to do it. So anyway, so we were in the room, and they had me all hooked up, and Matt was there with us, and I don't even remember how he told our families. Like, I know he made all the phone calls, so I don't know if he did it before before she was delivered. I think he probably did, because of him getting home at midnight. There's no time to call then.
Right.
His mom was 4 hours away, and my folks were 5 hours away. And so I think that's what it was. When they were prepping me that morning, he was in the hall making phone calls and saying, this is what happened. We're at the hospital. She's being induced. We're going to deliver. When we do, we'll let you know, or whatever. We knew that none of our family would be able to come.
It's too far
Matt's
away.
mom was a widow. His dad passed when he was 50 from leukemia.
Oh.
So she had been a widow for many years, and still was, and was working full time because she had to support herself, And my mom had rheumatoid arthritis very, very badly, and was type 1 diabetic, and she couldn't work. My dad worked full time to support them. So, I mean, I'm sure that he could have taken off work, that, they would have let him.
Yeah.
But I didn't want him to do that. I just wanted them to just stay put. I knew my mom wouldn't travel very well. And so there really wasn't an option for our families to be with us, But he did call and tell him. And of course, his brothers and sisters were here, there, and everywhere, across the country. In fact, one of his older sister, she and I were pregnant 3 times together.
Oh.
Actually 4. We had babies within a month of one another 4 different times.
Oh.
So she was currently pregnant.
Yeah.
And my best friend was currently pregnant, which I'm sure terrified them,
Yeah.
that here I was with a baby who was gone.
All of a
And here
sudden,
they're,
yeah.
they're holding, his sister was due, let's see, Cassie was born in September. So his sister was due in November, I guess, October, November.
Yeah.
And my friend was due in February. So she had even longer to worry and ponder and whatever. So anyway, but he made all those calls. And I do think I called my best friend and told her. She lived in Missouri or Michigan. I don't know. She lived somewhere at that point. That was what was going on. So the rest of the time we just waited, in labor. And I don't think, the other thing too that happened, so sweet, since nobody knew what had happened, why Cassie died, they didn't know what size she would be. And so they brought me in all these darling little handmade dresses.
Yeah.
And teeny, teeny, tiny ones, teeny tiny, all the way up to a full term,
Yeah.
And I picked out a little pink dress for her, hand smocked. It was absolutely gorgeous. The care and the love that went into that. And they had they told me ladies made them special for the babies. And they just, they have a supply of them in their whatever room, and they keep them for when a baby dies, and then the mother gets to choose which one she would like. And so I chose one that wasn't all the way full term, but wasn't too small either. I thought, we did know how much she had weighed like the previous week at the the appointment and stuff. So yeah, I picked that out. And I don't think they didn't have like a little hat, how usually newborns get a hat. And I have all three of my kids' hats, but for some reason Cassie didn't get a hat. I'm not sure why, but because I would have kept it. Anyway, so I had already picked out an outfit to bring her home in, but I ended up keeping that and putting it in a shadow box. So I have a little shadow box memorial for her, and I had that sitting out because I kind of wanted to show you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to see that at some point.
So yeah, so then she was delivered at 4:43 in the afternoon. Like everyone else, it was just utter silence in the room, and I was so hot, of course, when you're laboring, you're hot. And I always wish they would just like put a fan on me, like through all my labors. Can I just have a fan? No, that'll chill the baby, So, but yeah, so I don't remember much. I remember my doctor getting there because he had done deliveries the day before, but I think he was supposed to be in the office then on Tuesday, but he said it didn't matter. He was going to be there for this delivery. And so the nurses were there with me and stuff until it got closer to time. And then they knew and everything. And then he came in, and bless his heart, and his sweet little bow tie. And, he just was just so precious, and, delivered her. And the pain wasn't quite as bad because she was smaller. She was 5'14", and she was 19 and a half inches long. So
still a pretty good
she
size,
was,
though.
she was just a normal baby.
Yeah. She was 38-ish weeks, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
And they say, or what I had read is that they usually gain a pound a week, like in the last, month. So that would have put her right on par with the rest of my kids. My biggest baby was 8'3", so 7'10", 8'3", and 7'5". So she would have been right there. She was just perfect.
Yeah.
But when she came out, he had to take the cord from around her neck, and it was wrapped 5 or 6 times. It was extremely tight. And then he said right away, Lori, she just got tangled up in her cord and couldn't get out. And, of course that, I don't know. And he said, I have a picture of him standing beside me, looking at her, and after I was holding her, and he was just crying. He was just so compassionate, and he just said, she probably did a lot of somersaults and gymnastics in there when she was little, and somehow she got caught in her cord. And then as she grew, it just got tighter and tighter. And I guess that it didn't cut off, like, wouldn't be her airflow. I guess it was her amniotic fluid. Wouldn't that be what that
Yeah,
was?
just the nutrients that she needed, yeah, to
Yeah, because that's what they breathe in there, right? I mean, they're not
yeah,
breathing air until they actually come out of the
yeah,
womb. So he said, yeah, that she, and I said, why could, why didn't we know this,
yeah,
and
yeah,
but he's like, there's not any way to know. You just, the only thing, when we had that advanced ultrasound, I remember them saying, here's the umbilical cord, and it looked like a bunch of bubbles, like a
mm,
like a string of bubbles. And I just remember thinking, not that they could have saved her at that point, but even with an advanced ultrasound, could you not see that it was wrapped around her neck?
yeah,
But again, there were no ultrasounds done until
yeah,
she was already gone.
yeah,
So, but even now, I don't know. I don't know if women have ultrasounds
yeah.
routinely.
They sometimes do, but even the ultrasound technology, I know that they have some that is pretty advanced, but it is not, it
That
is not,
advanced, right?
it's not that advanced, and also it's not as readily available because I mean, it's still new and quite expensive if I'm not mistaken. So I
Sure.
think,
Yeah, that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
yeah, because still
And
there's still plenty of umbilical cord accidents that happen, and
right,
that's basically I mean, they get tangled up and it was never identified for one reason or the other. So
right,
yeah,
right.
so
And I don't know that it could have been
yeah,
identified. I just
yeah,
don't know. I guess there's no way to know. I mean, yeah. Anyway, but why
yeah.
dwell on that? Because there was, nothing I could do anyway, nothing anybody could do. So anyway, he had to leave and go deliver other babies. And my husband, they did the hospital had a Polaroid camera that they
Oh,
gave to us to use.
great.
So that was awesome. You know, um, I don't know what they do now. I mean, I guess I know a lot of people do photographers, like
Hmm.
Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, and some
Yeah,
of those organizations do that. And boy, do I wish that we had something
yeah.
like that back then. But Matt had brought his camera. Now, mind you, this was a manual camera, an
Yes.
SLR camera,
Yep. Uh-huh.
and with a lens that had to
Hmm.
be focused. And one of the nurses that I had, her name was Heidi, and unbeknownst to us, because I'm in labor and Matt's there with me and all that, she's taking pictures with that camera. She had never picked up that kind of camera before, ever. And her pictures are perfectly in focus.
Oh,
I'm like, I just know God was
I know.
just
I was,
guiding her hands that
yeah.
day,
What a
because
blessing.
she had never taken any photos with that type camera, and everyone is crisp and clear and just precious, So she even came to see me at my house after we got back home, and just stopped by to check on us, And so she was special. She was very special. Um, so yeah, I mean, that was delivery, and we just were, we stayed in the hospital room, and I didn't want to stay overnight. I knew
Okay.
that much. And like I said, there was no such thing as a cuddle cot back
No,
then,
yeah, that
which
technology probably was very limited. Did they have any sort of like time frame that you could have Cassie with you? Did they say anything about
um,
that?
they they did. I'm trying to remember. The memory is so fuzzy. I want to say it was four hours we had with her,
Oh, okay.
and when she came out, you might be able to see on the photos, I think, but when she came out, like, her skin, like, got through the birth canal got like a cut on it, kind of, because
Yeah.
like her skin was already starting to break down.
Yeah.
But they do believe that she had just died on that Sunday. So when I felt her do that humongous kick,
you think it was
and I would,
that was her last.
I wonder if maybe that was just a last ditch effort
to get your
for her to
attention, whatever. Yeah.
try to get free or something. Sorry. I think that upsets me more than anything. Just knowing that she was struggling and I didn't even know. But you know, they also did the count the kicks thing now, you know, and that wasn't so prevalent back then. I mean, they mentioned it to you as kind of, oh, it's a good thing to, you know, sit down once or twice a day for 15 minutes and just kind of, you know, and I was like, I've got 3 kids, you know, when can I sit down
Exactly.
for 15 or 30 minutes, you know, and in a quiet place and try to count her kicks, you know?
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and I just, you know, I just regret to this day that I didn't do that, because maybe I would have known sooner that she was struggling, you know. But, you know, time can't fix that either.
Yeah.
So, but her head was very purple where the cord had been around her neck. The rest of her was pretty pink. She was pink when she came out, and you know, gradually then she started graying a little bit. But the one memory that stands out to me more than anything else is that I picked her up and held her like this, and she was so cool and I was so hot, and I just remember she just felt so good just to hold, because her body was cool, because she wasn't alive anymore. And I just held her and used her to help me cool down, I guess, because I was, you know, sobbing, and you know, the stress of the delivery and just the emotions that she was just so precious. And she looked like Evan, who was our second-born son. She had his round little face and chubby cheeks, and like I said, she had my toes. She had my toes, but she had Evan was blondish when he was a little, blonder than my oldest and our daughter Abby. They were both very dark hair, like my husband, and I was blonde as a baby. So Evan and Cassie were blonde, and she could tell she had a little bit of curl to her hair, as all of my children do, because Matt has curls that like he doesn't anymore. He's bald now and has been for many years. But he actually shaved his head. Must have been, it was 1997, so it must have been right after Cassie. But he did have like some kind of like scalp condition that would it was his hair just aggravated it. So this is a funny story. So I tell this in the midst of my grief. You will see that we do have a picture of us smiling, and it's a little Polaroid, and it's the two of us smiling. And I said it was the first selfie ever taken. You know, well, we were smiling, and you know, you can only cry so much.
Yes.
You know, you've got to be able to allow yourself to just breathe, and you know, so we holding up this Polaroid camera, like trying to take our picture, you know, like a selfie. And but anyway, the story about his hair was that he decided that he was tired of messing with it, and so, but his hair was the kind, and it was kind of longish, where if it got wet, he would like shake it and it would go doing. So
he would get the
they're
curl.
like it's like spring hair, you know. But he came to bed when I had gone to bed. It must have been, it had to have been right after Cassie died. Anyway, but I was in bed and he got home late or something. and came to bed. And in the middle of the night, you know how you kind of wake up and stir a little bit and then you get comfortable and go back to sleep. And I happened to look over and I see this white orb in bed with me. And I was like, what in the world? But he had just shaved his head that night before he came to bed. And it hadn't had any sunlight on it. And the light was shining through the window. And all I could see was this white round orb.
Oh, that is hilarious.
No. Anyway, yeah, that's a funny story for me and him. But
Lee's gonna appreciate that because he shaves his head too.
Yeah, he'll relate. Yeah, but yeah, you could tell that Cassie's hair was a little bit curly, and we didn't see her eyes, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm assuming they were blue. All my baby's eyes were blue, and they've all turned green after the fact.
Oh, okay.
So that's how it worked out. But you know, one of the things that I find very fascinating is birth order. And I don't know if you've ever studied it or
I think
read
it's
about it
fascinating.
or whatever.
I think it's interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it usually goes, birth order, like if you have, in our case, one son and then a second son, they are like polar opposites from each other. And then you have a daughter and then you have another daughter, and they would be, but usually the first of each sex or the second of each sex are alike. And we just found that interesting because Cassie would have been the second born girl. Evan was the second born boy. And they just looked so much alike. She looked so much like him,
Yeah.
And so we've just always said through the years that we think Cassie would have looked a lot like him even as an adult. And, I mean, although we don't know, but I will say my firstborn son and my firstborn daughter are like two peas in a pod,
Okay. Yeah.
So maybe that would be true. I don't know.
But it is nice to like think and almost visualize with your kids. Like what would Cassie look like?
Yes.
Because I do the same thing with my son too. Like, I wonder what he would look like. And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that's just kind of how we've always talked about her, that she would look like Evan. And I think one time, even on some app or something, there was where you could add your picture and it would add like a filter.
Oh, yeah.
And so we put a picture of him in there and then added a woman's filter on it. And we're like, maybe that's what she would have looked like, I don't know.
I know. Isn't that, it's kind of fun to think about and imagine. So you guys decided to keep her for some time. You got to take some Polaroid selfies and pictures and stuff, which is awesome. Right. Was there any other things that you guys did while you were in the hospital with her? Because, I mean, 4 hours is quite a short time if you think about it. Because you're probably still delivering placenta and getting sewn up if needed and kind of recovering from the birth itself. Were you able to do any other things with her?
It seemed like we probably really only had her for a couple of hours, I know because of what you were just saying. I sang to her. That is something that and there was an old hymn called Safe in the Arms of Jesus. And my grandmother, I remember her singing that, like when I was young and stuff. And so after I knew that she had died, I found a hymnal at home, and I happened to have, because I play piano and I had one there from when I was younger, and I found the song in there and I tore the page out and took it with me and sang the verses to her because it's all I could do.
Yeah.
And we were allowed to bathe her very gently though, because her skin was longer because of the no cuddle cot type of thing. Her skin was continuing to break down, so we just barely wiped her. And I have always loved baby lotion and I used it on all my children, and so I rubbed her with lotion and brushed her hair and put a little gown on her, but they weren't going to give me a diaper. And I was mortified. It literally like put me in a panic almost. I was like, my baby has to have a diaper, and knowing full well that she didn't need a diaper. But, bless them, they brought me a baby diaper, a little tiny diaper, and I put it on her. So, and then we had a couple friends from our church, one of a girl that I'd been close to for many, many years. In fact, we went through Lamaze class with our very first babies together. And so she came up and held Cassie. And then the leader of our children's ministry at the church that we went to, that couple came up and they held her as well, and yeah, so that was special. But, the kids, I didn't have the kids come up. Rachel just kept them for us. And, over the years, I've gone back and forth on that. I wish I had. I'm glad I didn't. Most of the time now, though, I wish I had. But, you only know now what you didn't know then because of hindsight,
Yep.
So we left the hospital. I guess we probably, they said that, they would only let us have her, that amount of time. And I remember they came in one time and said, are you ready for us to take her? I was like, no, please don't. So they let us keep her a little bit longer. And so finally, I don't know, it must have been about 7:30, I don't know, something. They came in and they said, honey, we really have to take her now. And I just remember asking, can somebody please hold her? Please don't just lay her down somewhere. Because I don't know what they do in that situation. They had to wait for the coroner or whoever to come. But I didn't want her to be alone in a room. I needed somebody to be there to hold her. So one of the nurses said that she would keep her with her at the nurse station. She said, I'll keep her right there with me. So that was special. And then they, of course, took me out in a wheelchair, which I had very easy deliveries and very easy recoveries with my babies, all four of them. And I'm so grateful for that. But I didn't want to go down in a wheelchair,
Right.
Because, it's just, that's kind of what you do when you take the baby home.
Yeah.
You go down in the wheelchair with the car seat and so I didn't want to do that. Thankfully, it was late enough at night that it was past visiting hours. So there weren't a lot of people around and like just the front desk person or whatever. So they took me down and we got back in the car. And, honestly, after that, I don't remember a lot about what happened. Like, I don't remember going to pick up the kids, but we must have, and, I do know that Ezra, I don't know if I said this or not about him, calling his little friends to tell him about the birthday party. So I know somewhere in there that happened. I think that must have happened Monday evening. So I really don't remember what happened after I delivered her. Oh, because that was the thing. Matt had told me, well, we went to the funeral home. Now that must have been, let's see, I think they buried her. Did we bury her the next day? I think we did. We didn't want to have a funeral. I couldn't bear that. I just couldn't. I couldn't bear having anybody there. I didn't want my parents there. I didn't want his parents there. I just wanted it just to be the five of us, I'm not sure why, but that was the only way I felt comfortable. I think a lot of that was shock. I think that maybe had I waited a day or so, maybe I would have felt differently, but it was kind of like, I just need to get this done. I've just got to say goodbye and move on, because it was just so painful, as it is for every mom, but I believe the next morning we must have gone to the funeral home, although I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
And Matt said that, he's like, we sat at the desk and they asked us, what we needed. And we said,
well, interestingly enough, the mortuary again is in this teeny tiny little town that we had lived in previously. Before we moved to Grand Rapids, we lived in a little town on the outskirts of Grand Rapids because that's where we had found a house to rent.
Yeah. Okay.
You know how that is.
Yeah.
And then, so when we went to the mortuary, funeral home, whatever, when Matt told the man his name, he's like, well, was your granddad Elton? And Matt's like, yeah, he was. And he's like, oh, he's like, I knew Elton. He said, what did he say? The funniest jokes I ever knew were ones your or the cleanest jokes I ever knew were ones your grandpa told. So we found out then that actually Matt's grandpa had been the pastor at the tiny little church in the cemetery where we were going to put her.
Oh.
And the reason that we put her there is because that's where Matt's grandparents were buried, where his dad is buried there, and his mom, they shared a stone, but his mom wasn't gone yet. But so they allowed us just to bury her in that same plot or area where the family was.
Yeah. Okay.
So we did that. And we didn't have the money for a burial, and they took care of all that for us. Didn't charge us a penny. And our Sunday school class or our small group class took up a collection and paid for the headstone, which at that cemetery you could have a headstone.
Yeah. Okay.
And then so they did that, took care of that, and yeah. So we went out, and that it was later that afternoon. They had already, dug the thing. I don't know how quickly they can make up, a headstone, a gravestone, but they had the little plaque on it and everything. They must have made it up immediately because it was there when we went out there. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the stone was little, but it was,
it's so tiny.
but it was very heavy. Anyway, so we went out, and there's some pictures of us out there, and that the little hole. And I'm one of those people that I cannot stay for the lowering of the body into the ground at any funeral. I could do it for my mom or my dad or anybody. So I couldn't do it for Cassie for sure. So I just, they just had her there next to the little, the grave, and we said our goodbyes. I think we took roses to the grandparents' graves and his dad, and left him. And then we left, and they took care of the rest for us, covered her up, and that would have just killed me. There's just no way I could have watched them do that.
Yeah.
So
no,
it's so final, it's just that part is just so final. You realize it's really over. It's done,
Yeah.
So, and then the next morning, we had already decided that I was like, I have to get out of this house. I cannot be here. The crib was up. I had just cleaned all the baby bottles and put them up. I had her clothes all washed, and and I had just done that like that week before she passed. And so we decided that next morning we got up and we loaded up the family and went and stayed for about 5 days with my parents. Which my relationship with my parents was not the greatest, more so my mom than my dad. And it wasn't an easy time. I will mention this too, because I don't know if other moms have this issue, but with every pregnancy or every delivery I had, I got mastitis afterwards, which is a breast infection from a clogged duct. Every single delivery, well, there were 3 of them, I had gotten that. And so I had told my doctor before I left the hospital, I said, I know it's going to happen again when my milk comes in. And so he wrote me out a prescription ahead of time, said, take this with you, get it filled if you need it. If you don't need it, no big deal. And of course I did, to me, it's like all these things, it's like, well, now I got a breast infection from clogged milk ducts because I have no baby to give it to, and I never could pump milk. I don't know what it was. I had very difficult time breastfeeding the first time around. yeah, it just was not a walk in the park.
Yes, yeah.
So I was never able to pump like some women can, and because of that, I couldn't get it out,
Yeah.
So I just would stand in the shower and let the water run on them, and that's where I would cry. I tried not to cry in front of my kids. I mean, I did some, but I mean, I would weep in the shower,
Yeah.
because it just felt so unfair that I should have all this milk and not have a baby,
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
It is. It feels so unfair. Lori, how did you end up telling the kids? Do you remember anything about like even at the cemetery, did they understand what was happening? They were still pretty
yeah,
young.
I think
Okay.
they did.
Okay.
Yeah, because we did, after we had delivered her that night when we got home, I think we talked to them then. We
Okay.
asked that they keep them up because we knew they weren't going to school the next morning because we were going to leave. So we just asked I think our friends were staying with them, and we said, just keep them up so we can see them when we come home. And we just explained that, something had happened and she had died in my tummy, and, we needed to bury her. Now we were going to put her in a little box. She couldn't come home, and she had gone to heaven,
Yeah.
to
Okay.
be with Jesus and Papa and
Yeah.
great grandma and grandpa,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and they did understand. I mean, I'm not sure how much Abby really understood because she
Right.
was just like 4,
Mhm.
but in some of the photos, there's one in particular where she's sitting on my lap, and she just has such a sad look on her face. That
Mhm.
may have even been Cassie's first birthday, because there's some pictures of that in there too. So
Yeah.
at least by her first birthday, by another year, she was very aware and felt, yeah. So
Oh, yeah, that's hard to I just think of telling our daughter about our
how
son's
old was
passing.
she?
She was like 3.5. She would have been like
Mm,
right around 3.5 when that happened, and so that was difficult.
yeah,
Like you're right, just grasping it, but not totally fully grasping it, and
right.
yeah. So
I think maybe it's easier for people like maybe to say, "Oh, she went to heaven," even
yes,
if you don't
exactly.
necessarily believe in heaven or so.
Yeah,
Somehow I think it helps kids maybe because I don't know. Maybe it seems like everybody knows of heaven. I
yeah,
don't know. I
yeah.
don't know.
A better
But
place, yeah, and that's
yeah,
essentially what we
right,
told her too, but she was really sad that we couldn't bring him home. And
right,
because she was
sure.
pretty stoked to have a little brother, and so,
Aw.
that how that goes, so
Yeah. Well, of course, because they're, they've seen mommy's tummy
yeah,
grow for
yeah,
9 months. And then all of a
exactly.
sudden nothing comes out of the tummy,
Yeah, yeah, there's
So
nothing to show for it, and
hard,
that's
right.
the
Hard to
hard thing about it.
understand.
Lori, thank you so much for sharing Cassie's story. I'm so
I'm
sorry, and
sorry. I'm sorry that I've been so emotional. I honestly did
oh,
not think that it would
no,
be that emotional for me, but
no,
yeah,
like we said before, like, whenever we talk about our kids, it's just hard not to
it
to
is
get a
for
little
sure.
bit teary-eyed because they are just so sweet and so attached to us and part of us, and yeah. So,
Yeah.
but thank you so much for telling Cassidy's story.
Oh,
Is
thank
there
you.
any last thing that you want to say about who she is and what you wanna remember about her?
Just that I love her so much. I would love to have known her as an adult, like my other adult children, because I know she would have brought such good things to the world.
Thank you so much, Lori. That was perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.